So those who have not received my screen, are you able to see it now? Artificial intelligence and machine learning, what, how, and how to begin?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good to go. Thank you. And good. Artificial intelligence and machine learning. What is it, and how does it look like, and how to begin the journey in AI? Is what I intend to do today. We'll take a little.
Sir, still unable to see the screen, sir.
Just check it once again and sort of refresh. You can. If you have pinned my what do you call image, you will have a problem. Just unpin it, and you should be able to see the screen. See my presentation in your Google.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes,
Are you able to do it?
yes sir.
Okay, that's
It's
good.
working.
Good, thank you. So if those who have pinned my what do you call basically like my video, please unpin it. You should be able to see the screen. Good. Okay. So agenda is artificial intelligence and machine learning. What, how, and how to begin. Right. That's what I intend to do today. All right. You see Professor John McCarthy here, right? So artificial intelligence, this is a science of building intelligent machines or machines with decision-making capabilities. This was there right in the minds of people or scientists or philosophers, mathematicians, right from the days in which humans started inventing machines, right? Right from the days they had invented machines, they thought, okay, can we build machines with decision-making capabilities? Are there machines with decision-making capabilities? How to impart decision-making or intelligence to these machines? And it went on, and it is in 1990. It's 1956. Professor John McCarthy. He's a professor at Stanford. Was a professor at Stanford. You can check out his profile. And in a conference happened in Dartmouth, he coined the term artificial intelligence. So he termed the science of building intelligence machines as artificial intelligence. And he's considered to be one of the founders of this area, the discipline, right along with many others. And you can do a simple Google search. McCarthy is like, you can read about McCarthy. And he said it's a science of making intelligent machines. That's it, especially intelligent computer programs is what his definition is. Right, it went on. So what is intelligence? Intelligence is typically characterized as actionable knowledge with your understanding of the problem or the context that you're in. You should be able to take a decision where the external world would feel that the decision-making capability is said to be intelligent, right? It's smart, right? And can you build that capability, impart the capability to the machine is what AI is all about. That's what McCarthy said. And these are some of the machines, or rather some of the gadgets and machinery that most of you must be familiar with, right? You on the top left, you see a smart speaker, right? So you have seen a lot of it, right? And this is, you can actually ask, I want to listen to this particular song, and it'll tell you, like, I mean, primarily, like, it'll bring back to you that song, and then you'll be able to play it. Right? Basically, it's a smart speaker. It can respond to voice. It can understand your question, respond to it, and process that question, respond to it, take an action, and then whatever you can listen to a song, whatever. And you have got what do you call such smart speakers and such smart what do you call digital devices today. And on the top right, you see a car, a self-driving car, a car which is able to sense its environment, go beyond that, and then take actions, and then potentially drive the car, right? And you can sit at the back seat, relax, and drive, and the car will drive its own. So that's the second thing. And on the bottom left, what you see is a smart thermostat. This is called a Nest thermostat. Yeah, Google acquired it, and then they did like kind of, I mean, now it's basically spin off. So it's called a Nest thermostat. What it does is, thermostat controls what do you call devices like a air conditioner or even your electric iron. So what this thermostat does is, this is used to control air conditioning devices, ACs. And so when you use an air conditioner, maybe when you're switching on at early in the morning or early in the night, maybe like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, whatever. Then you say, okay, yeah, let me put the temperature at 19 degrees Celsius. And then a little while after that, they feel that, okay, hey, I don't need this kind of 19. Let me put it at 21, and at midnight, you may change that to 29, right? So there is a pattern of usage at which or with which people use an air conditioner. So this smart thermostat, and when you use this air conditioner for long, you collect a lot of data. And what this thermostat does is, it can understand from that data, it can identify the pattern of usage of your usage of the air conditioner, and then beyond a point, the thermostat will take over and say like, okay, based on your pattern of usage, it'll adjust. And this, of course, you can override it. And such thermostats are easily available in the market today, right? This was the pioneer. This was the first one. And this is called the Nest thermostat, and multi-billion dollars Google acquired this company in, I think, in 2014, right? And then so this is a story. It's a story of a smart thermostat, an AI, a device, a small device with an AI embedded in it, a little AI to make out things and take what do you call intelligent actions around it. And on the bottom right, you have Sophia. Sophia is what do you call a robot with speech, movement, and some emotional capabilities, and it's a citizen of Saudi Arabia also. So this Sophia is a robot which all of you must have read about it. And so this has multiple capabilities, multiple decision-making capabilities, and capabilities to respond contextually with speech, movement, as well as emotions, right? So all I want to say with these pictures is AI is nothing new. It's all there with us. It's all around us. And it's all about smart devices or smart compute embedded into devices or machines or the life around us, the context around us, so that that little compute with that smart capability, that decision-making capability or knowledge, actionable intelligence capability is able to give an experience which typically used to be exhibited by living beings, right? And so we have gone far beyond Professor John McCarthy's definition. And the story went on. People did a lot of research around AI, and we still do it, right? And people have come out with very interesting definitions of it. This is something that I've taken a sample. It's just a sample of the study of mental faculties through the use of computational models is Starnik in 1985. So there are many definitions of AI. So the bottom line is AI is all about, it's a science of building machines which are smart in nature, which have decision-making capabilities, which do have knowledge-driven intelligence, meaning knowledge-driven decision-making capabilities or actionable intelligence. So that science of building such machines is called AI. And people said like it's all about mimicking humans, it's all about mimicking living beings, it's all about imparting that capability to the machine. So machine intelligence or artificial intelligence is all about giving that intelligence capability, which is very difficult to define. People call it actionable knowledge, people call it decision-making capabilities, people call it smart capabilities, which mimics a living being. Can we impart that capability to a machine so that the machine, given a context, will act accordingly, right? That's what AI is all about. And people have given a lot of definitions. You can read about it, right? How does it work? How does it work? Let us start with a small context. The context is like this. Think of a public office. It can be your the office where you get your driving license or your vehicle registration. Let's assume that's called the regional transport office, right? It's a public office, and there is a smart door at your at the office, and the smart door is the one that controls entry to that office. And the smart door is smart like this. If you are wearing, we are in the midst of a pandemic, and if you are wearing a proper mask, right? If you are wearing a mask, what with this particular smart door will do is it'll basically understand that yes, with the camera that it has, it identifies, yes, this is a person with a mask, I can allow him to enter, right? If the person doesn't have a mask, what the smart door will do is it'll say, okay, it'll give you a message back either through a speaker or a display saying like, hey, I mean, you don't have a facial mask. I mean, you don't have a proper mask weared. I mean, you're not wearing a mask properly, and then you're not allowed to come with a mask because the public office. So let us think of such a smart device connected to a door, and if you are wearing a mask, the door will identify, and the smart mechanism will identify it, and will open the door for you. And if you're not wearing a mask, it will give you a message. It will give you either a what you call a voice message or a display saying like a, or even it can even be a small red light saying the door will not be opened. Right? So with that little picture, with that little imagination, let us understand how an AI works in a context. So there is the AI agent. AI agent is that small, what you call smart controller of that door with a processor, a knowledge and a knowledge of a model. So there'll be a controller processor with that, and there'll be like some sort of a mechanical assembly with which the door can be controlled, and that becomes what you call part of the AI, the entire mechanism with an AI agent there. And the environment is like, I mean, the environment in which this particular smart mechanism is placed is basically like kind of the entry to that office, right? And then comes what you call the agent understands the environment through sensors. What are the sensors that you see here in this particular thing? You have, so primarily like somebody is in front of it trying to push a button saying like, okay, open the door. And then the camera is on. Camera is a sensor and the button is a sensor, but it says like, okay, yeah, there is somebody. Or you can even put a what you call smart heat sensor in front of it, or it can be an AR sensor in front of it, understanding that there's a human in front of it, or there's an object in front of it. And then the camera is on, that's another sensor. And the camera, whatever, is sensed. And then there's an AI agent. AI agent will understand, yeah, there is a human in front of it. So you must have seen like smart doors at shops and offices where what you call the moment a human gets in, it understands there's a human, and then the door opens, the glass door especially opens. So the AI agent understands, yes, there is a human there. And yeah, then the face, the camera takes the photograph of the face, and the AI agent do have a knowledge or a model about a face with a mask and without a mask, right? And then it decides, hey, this is a person without a mask, yes, which means that I cannot, right? So my actuator is basically sensors are things through which you understand the environment. The agent understands the environment. Agent perceives on the environment, and actuators are the means by which the agent responds to the environment. So what are the actuators out here? In our smart door, we have got a speaker as an actuator. We can potentially give a message back. A small LED light, a red blinking light can be an actuator. What can be another actuator? Actuator can be a display. Actuator can be the mechanism which controls that mechanical what do you call assembly which opens the door. That's an actuator. The mechanical assembly or the motor assembly which is being controlled by the AI agent is an actuator. The assembly with which you open a door is an actuator, right? So an AI agent or an AI works in an environment by perceiving inputs through appropriate sensors from the environment, and acts or by means of actuators, and there is a processing, right? A processing is not blind. It do have a knowledge on the problem in which it is working on. So it's a knowledge driven mechanism, and actions or decisions are taken. Actions are driven by decisions, and the decisions are taken by actionable knowledge or a model. We can even call it the mental model, right? Of a human. We are aware of it. A mental model of how a T should look like. We understand it. A mental model of how I drive a car in a traffic, an environment where there is heavy traffic. a mental model of how it can drive in a highway, right? So there is this model, so there is this knowledge. So AI do have primarily three components. Then there is the processor part with some know-how, knowledge, or a model. The sensors through which you perceive the environment, actuators through which you act on the environment. And this is how it typically works. I hope this clarifies how an AI works in a context, right? Then the natural, so basically like the model is the most critical element. And this is one of the reasons why people call intelligence as actionable knowledge, right? So unless otherwise you have contextual knowledge to solve that problem, you may not be. And we are going to experience one such way of building a model in today's class. All right. So that's how an AI works. And naturally, a question would be, I'll just, switch back to your class. Are there any questions, concerns over here so far? One of you can respond if there are questions. Are there any concerns so far? Okay, that's good. Okay, good. And so how to build? The natural question is good. So there's a AI working in an environment. The AI can be the AI that drives a car. AI can be the AI that gives you that smart response in a smart speaker. The AI can be the smart code inside the thermostat which responds to your needs on, or you can override it. And the AI can be your smart door control mechanism, right? And how do you actually build this AI? So the primary component of this AI, right, to solve any problem would be that capability, or imparting that capability, that smart capability, or that knowledge-driven decision-making capability to the machine, right? And the most critical component would be the model, or the knowledge with which it can act. There are primarily two ways in which AI can be built. Before I get into how do you build AI, let's take an example. Let's take a real world example, right, of AI, building AI. We are all aware of paneer butter masala, right? Paneer butter masala, and you have a recipe. You have a recipe for paneer, for making paneer butter masala, right? And your problem in hand is how to make paneer butter masala, right? And there are two ways in which you can do this. The first way would be you have a well-written set of rules. You have a recipe. You have a recipe. You know the recipe. You take a printout of the recipe. It's in your kitchen. You just follow the recipe and you make it, right? That's one way of building the paneer butter masala, right? Another way of building paneer butter masala would be, yes, I need to make it. Let me see how people make it, right? Let me observe my mother making it, right? And then, yeah, I got a feel of it. And then my sister, aunt, I look at, or my brother making it, or my father making whatever, the paneer butter masala. And I have a lot of contextual data, all right? And from that contextual data, can I make my own mental model of a recipe of making paneer butter masala? Can I make my own mental model of that recipe, right? Nobody has explicitly given me the recipe of making paneer butter masala. Rather, from the data available to me, for which I know that this is how, like, kind of, these are videos, or these are my experience on observing people making paneer butter masala. Let me build the rules of the game, meaning let me build my own recipe, mental model of the recipe, and then I try it. That's a second way of doing it. And this exactly matches to the way we build AI also. All right, let's get back to formal ways of looking at how AI is built. So there are primarily like the way, I mean, very similar to the way we have seen how to make a paneer butter masala, as simple as that. There are two ways in which you can build AI. The primary way of building an AI is rule-based or explicitly programmed. You have a small game, for example, tic-tac-toe. The rules of the games are known to you, and you have certain strategies to play a tic-tac-toe, so that you know that you can potentially win. If you know everything, what do? You write the rules of the game, you write the strategies, you write programs around it, and this particular program can play against a human. All right. And so there is a smart computer program which is perceived to be smart, which can play with a human, and then you can even build such games as chess and all that. And early on expert systems, you can go back to early on expert systems which played games like a Deep Blue and all that. So you had this kind of early on playing games or softwares which were explicitly programmed. All right. Another example that I want to say is explicitly programmed AI would be rule-based chatbot. Say whenever you get into the new era web portals, especially in banking sector, banking portals, and that, hey, this little chatbot comes up and asks you, hey, how can he help you? How can he help you? And then you can ask him, ask that bot, hey, how are you and all that, and very generic questions. Or you can even ask that bot questions like, how do I start a savings bank account? All right. And there are well-defined procedures for making or opening a savings bank account. You know how to, like, and you have to submit certain KYC documents or whatever, and you have to submit your photographs. You have to get it signed by maybe somebody who is known to the bank, or maybe an introducer or whatever. So the process is known, and the process is well documented. What you can do when you build a chatbot like this, when you get a question like, how do you build a savings bank account? Then the answer is known. All right. So how do you build such a chatbot? It's pretty straightforward. There is a technology which is an XML-based technology called AIML. AIML. It's nothing but a set of question-answer pairs. A set of question-answer pairs. How are you? I'm fine. How are you is the answer. How do you open a savings bank account? Step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the answer. And like what time the bank opens, there is an answer. And likewise, you have a set of question-answer pairs. You put all these in an XML format, right, in AIML. And when a new question, when somebody like you get into the portal and ask a question, how does the bot respond? The bot takes a match of the question that you ask, right? How do you open a savings bank account? My question would be like, how a savings bank account is opened? Yeah. So what the engine do? The engine does a matching of your query with the set of all queries or questions that it knows, and finds the best match. From the best match, right? Now your question is mapped, your query is mapped to one of the questions it knows, and then the answer is returned. Here again, all I want to say is, you know the rules of the game. You know everything about how do you respond to it, and the world is well known to you. It's all can all be explicitly programmed. More than 85-90% of the chatbots that you see today in the market, in the commercial market, are rule-based chatbots. So there is no, it's all like kind of explicitly programmed, just like the recipe is known, right? I know like how to do the game, how to attempt, how to solve the problem. So the rule-based is still ruling the chatbot industry today. And primarily you can look at, I mean, there are rule-based chatbot bots available across the spectra, and you can go back, check some of them. Right. And a third rule-based AI system that you are seeing everyday life would be is called a robotics process automation, RPA. RPA is a term which is celebrated in today's AI world, and primarily because people say like AI will replace a lot of jobs. And one of my friend was making a comment, what you call hundreds of computers may replace millions of people, is what he was saying in one of the conferences that we had. This may be true, and AI, I mean, people say like, what do you call AI will replace, what sort of AI is actually replacing jobs? And in that context, what do you call the new age AI enabled jobs? One of the most interesting terms discussed is RPA, or it stands for, it's an acronym standing for robotics process automation, RPA. What is it? RPA is, I hope you're all familiar with, I'll just look at my screen once again. Yeah. RPA, robotic process automation, because I am sorry, I had somebody trying to get into the classroom, so I was admitting him. Okay, so back to our discussion, robotic process automation. What is RPA, robotic process automation? Think of a invoice processing context. Invoice processing is basically, say you are an office, you are primarily what do you call a person handling invoice processing in office. Invoice is a bill that is coming to you. For, say for example, your office has procured 5 air conditioners, all right, through an appropriate process. So there was a proper process through which you had enough of publishing a quotation, RFP, meaning request for quotations, RFQs, and then you received quotations, you had gone through the process which is admissible by the law, and then you have chosen one vendor to potentially provide you with, supply you 5 air conditioners, and you've got the air conditioners costs is there, the time delays with which you will get it delivered, everything is there. So the quotation is properly in place, and you are the invoice processing person, right? Your job is, okay, the air conditioners got supplied and the vendor submitted your bill over email, all right? Your job is to open the vendor's email, understand, okay, there are 5 air conditioners, this is the bill for 5 air conditioners, and then you get the bill will have an amount, and the amount should match with the one that he has actually quoted in his quotation earlier, which got selected through the process. So check whether the prices are the same and appropriate, it's legal in nature. All the, whatever the GST or whatever the current accepted norms of the governance mechanism is in place, and then you look at what you call what is the total cost of it, put that into an Excel and create a bank statement so that you can tell your bank that, and see the bank account details from that email or that invoice. You create a bank statement saying like, okay, this much amount needs to be given to this person on this day, right, within these days, and inform back to the person that yes, your invoice, your bill is processed, the vendor, that your bill is processed, and you will be getting your money in 3 days time, right? So you have to send a mail back with proper statement to generate and all that. So there is, and you are the invoice processing person in the office. So there is a regularity in your processing. The regularity is, your job is check your mail, anything with that invoice tag, you take it out, check for legalities on price aspect, comparing with the quotation, check put the actual amount into an Excel or whatever, and then you compute the cost, generate bank statement, prepare a reply mail or reply letter back to the vendor, send it back, send the bank statement, and the game is over, meaning your job is done. All right, there is a regularity, there is a recipe through which you do the job. And today, this is very much automatable. And there are open source as well as proprietary softwares available in the market to do robotic process automation. And what will do? All those back office jobs with a regularity in the recipe of their work, meaning the way in which they do work, if there is a regularity, this particular automation software, robotic process automation software, can automate it. So what it does is you can automate a job which is the back office job, which is repeatable in nature. All right. And again, back to our original thought, this is rule based. You know the rules of the game. Download the email, download the attachment from them. Look for emails with specific keywords. If there is a download, there is an attachment, download the attachment, take out the attachment, process, parse the document, get out those figures, put it into some Excel or something, and then whatever, you process it, you generate bank statement, you generate reply, and send a mail back, meaning to the vendor as well as to the bank, right? Your job is done. So you can write code, you can write script to automate the entire process. So rather than somebody looking at an email and doing this is automatable. And there are many companies across India, even in Trivandrum, I see at least 4 or 5 companies doing this particular kind of automation, primarily for the US, Europe, and the Middle East market. This will replace a lot of jobs with the repeatable nature, where the recipe or that repeatable work do have a repeatability, meaning like it can be written in terms of rules. The rules can be scripted, and there are platforms which allows you to do this. This is called RPA. We'll come back to this at a later point in time, because now people are talking about smart, intelligent RPA or cognitive RPA. We'll come back at some point in the course. So what I want to say is there is rule-based AI, and most of the early on AI was rule-based. What is the second class? The second way in which you can build, or means through which you can build AI, is machine learning based AI. You don't know the rules of the game. You have to make your own recipe to solve the problem. Recipe meaning model. You have to build your own knowledge so that you can take actions around it, right? You have to build knowledge to make intelligent actions, or actionable knowledge needs to be built. The model needs to be built, right? That's the second class of AI, machine learning based AI, where the machine, using available data, understands the context, builds its own model, builds its own, we can call it a mental model, whatever, with its own knowledge. And with that knowledge, it gets actionable capability. It builds actionable knowledge called model, right? That's a second class of AI, machine learning based AI, learning two things, right? Learning the recipe through which you can take smart actions, or actions which are knowledge driven in nature. That's a second class machine learning based AI, right? So then the natural question is, your question should be around learning. What is learning, right? So this is a kid in an online classroom, right? And these are pictures, or basically the frames that he's familiar with on his class teacher, right? He has seen these kind of pictures of his class teacher in the online class, and let's assume that the kid has not seen his teacher. It's new to the school, and he has, like with the pandemic, he has seen only the teacher through an online platform, right? And he has seen the faces in these posters, right? But when he sees his teacher with this tilted face also, he's able to recognize, hey, this is my teacher, all right? If the kid is only memorizing what it is seen so far, a slightly different view of the face, the kid would not be able to recognize. So memorization, if the question is memorization learning? The answer is memorization is the trivial way. Memorization is not learning, is a trivial way to act in a context, to take a decision in a context. And learning is not memorization. Learning is beyond memorization. And what is learning then? Learning is generalization. The kid is able to generalize beyond what he has seen, right? from the available data, can you build a mental model? The kid has built a mental model of the teacher's face, and with that mental model, given a new picture in a different angle, the kid is able to recognize that this is my teacher, right? So this is learning, right? Learning is not remembering all the data that you've seen. Learning is building your own abstraction from the data that you've seen. So that abstraction is called a model, or your actionable knowledge, with which, given a new context, you should be able to act, you should be able to decide, right? So learning is not memorization. Learning is beyond memorization. Learning is all about building that abstraction in your mind or in the machine's memory, or a model with which you can act. That's called learning, right? And this is another basically context or paper, rather research, that I want to discuss with you. Watanabe, 1995. Some of you are interested, I can share you this paper. So what Watanabe did is he has placed pigeons in Skinner boxes, right? These are boxes where, and the pigeon was presented with paintings of two different artists. Let's assume that's Monet and Picasso. And when the pigeon is pecking on a particular, the picture of a particular artist, say for example, Picasso, you give it a grain. You give it a grain, right? You give it a what do you call, a grain of wheat or something, all right? And the interesting part is, when the pigeon was trained on a set of pictures of Monet and Picasso, whenever the pigeon pecked on a picture from Picasso, what they've done is, in the experiment, they have given it a grain. If it is Monet, you don't get a grain. And the interesting part is, pigeons were able to discriminate between painting of the two artists with 95% of accuracy when present with pictures it has already been trained on. Right? Seen pictures with 95% correctness, the pigeon was able to identify. And that was not the surprise. The surprise is 85% success in previously unseen paintings. Right? Let's assume that the pigeon was shown 500 pictures, and 250 from Monet and 250 from Picasso. And on unseen pictures, 85, and you have given a 501 picture, right? Likewise, you have tested. And what happened is, like, on unseen pictures, 85% of the time, the pigeon was able to recognize the artist correctly, right? So which means that pigeons do not simply memorize the picture. They can extract and recognize potentially patterns, and they generalize from already seen to make predictions. This is what our brain, our neural network, the neural structure of our brain does, right? Good. So with that introduction, I want to give you a feel of, so machine learning is all about, we'll get to the formal definition of machine learning a little later. Machine learning is all about learning to solve problems, all right, with appropriate contextual data. So it's all about acquiring that abstraction, or learning that abstraction, or that knowledge, actionable knowledge, or you call it model, with which you'll be able to take actions, right? It's a field of computer science that gives computers the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed. Machine learning is not rule-based, right? Machine learning is all about, can you build out those rules, right? You have a lot of data, or you are in a context where you can collect data, or you don't have data which is properly organized, but can you make out a model? Can you build out those rules? Can you build out your mental model with which you can take actions, right? And this is a classic case of, this is a classic paradigm of machine learning. This is called a supervised learning. We'll come there. We'll understand a little further. So you've got a lot of data. The lot of data is all labeled data. Say you have pictures of Maruti cars labeled as Maruti, and you have also pictures of Merc cars labeled as Merc or Benz, right? Benz cars. You have pictures of, so there is data, there are photographs, there are 100 photographs of Maruti cars, there are 100 photographs of Benz or Merc cars. And the machine learning algorithm, right, is given this data saying, like, okay, these are all Maruti pictures and these are all Benz pictures. You build your own mental model, right? The algorithm builds it, all right? And algorithm builds what is called a model or a knowledge, right? It doesn't remember everything that it has seen, rather it builds its abstraction. And with that abstraction, it builds that abstraction. That process of building that abstraction is called learning, all right? Machine learning is all about the process of building that abstraction. And given a new photograph, which can be either of a Maruti or a Benz, it should, with the learned model, it should be able to say it's a Maruti or Benz. If it is another picture, it will potentially say, like, you have trained it on only on Maruti and Benz, it's say either Maruti or Benz. So it can go wrong. If you give the what you call picture of an Audi car, what will happen is, I mean, it may say either a Maruti or car because you don't have any other options out there, right? Otherwise, so with the model, the learned model, the abstraction that it has learned from the data, available data, the given a new point, a data point or a picture that it has not seen, it should be able to take an action, right? That's called. So this is the classic setting, right? Let us not let us not spend a lot of time on this text. Let's go experiment. Let's see it working in front of us. All right. I'll just take a I'll just take a good. Are you able to see my screen? Experiments with google.com, collection.ir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay, good. So far, I'll just, so machine learning is all about the process of building that model from available data, available context. That's what it is, the process or the way or the means through which you learn to build that model from your available data so that you can take actions, right? And what you build is called a model. Your knowledge abstraction is called model, right? That's what machine learning is all about. So AI is the science of building intelligent machines, and that intelligence can be imparted to machines in two ways. One is being explicitly programmed like an RPA or a AI ML chatbot or a rule-based game engine. The other way is you don't explicitly program, you try to build AI by allowing the machine or giving the capability for the machine, impart the capability for the machine to learn by its own. What it learns a model, it acquires that knowledge, so that given a new case, it should be able to act. All right, that's a second way of building an AI, which is called a machine learning based AI. Machine learning, formal definition we'll see later. Machine learning is all about the process of building that capability, right? The process of building that learning, process of building that model through which you can take actions. That process is called machine learning, and the way in which you do it's called an algorithm. So we'll come there later, right? Before we get into formal definitions of machine learning, let us get into a simple experiment. This is Google Experiments lab. I want you to go back to this Google Experiments lab, experience it, and I'm going to use a particular experiment in Google Experiments lab. This is called Teachable Machine, Google Teachable Machine, right? Let's launch the experiment in Google Experience lab. So we'll get started. Google Teachable Machines, you can create image projects, audio projects, and poster related projects, post related projects. I'm going to take an image project. The same thing that I was explaining you, we need to build a what you call a smart, an AI enabled door, right? Door which can detect a person with a mask and without a mask. All right. So I've got a setup here where I can give data to this machinery, and this machinery will learn and act. Let's see it. Let's see it. Rather than all of you can see my screen. Teachable machine. One of you can respond.
Yes, sir, we can see.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to upload, right? I'm going to define two labels. One is mask with mask, and the other is no mask. Mask and no mask. I am going to upload, give data to this machine, Google Teachable machine. This is a machine which can learn, right? Which can learn. Let me go to data. This is a data that I've collected from the web. A mask detect. So this is, I think this is mask detect, mask data. I've got 10 images. You can see it. These are these are the what do you call the images of people with mask, right? Let me upload that. You can see it. These are all images of mask, people with mask. I can, instead of uploading, I can actually get it from my drive. I can even do it through a webcam. Just for simplicity, I'm the no mask picture. Let me give examples of no mask picture. Data, mask detect, no mask. All of you see, like, so what I've done, I've created a data set, which I call a training data set. To train an AI engine, you must see a block called training. So there is a means by which Google has built what you call an algorithm or a mechanism which can learn. Now it is learning, trying to learn what it is trying to learn. People with mask and people without mask. So what after, like, I've given its examples. I've given 10 pictures of what you call people with mask, and I called it mask as M. That's a label for those collection of pictures. And I've given I think 11 images of people without mask, and I called it, that particular group of pictures were labeled as or tagged as or classified as no mask case. Right? I've given them enough examples to say the machine that, hey, I've got data. These are pictures of people with mask and these are pictures of people without mask. You build your mental model. Don't remember everything. Right? And you can see that my face doesn't appear anywhere here. Right? I don't have a picture over here. Out of these 11 or 22 images, I mean, my picture doesn't appear anywhere. I'm going to train this machine. I have given enough examples, contextual data to this machine, and ask the machine to build its own model, right? Knowledge. Let the machine get trained. You must see like kind of a lot of happening out there. Yeah, it says yes. Now I can actually like kind of, I have multiple. So I've got a trained model. Model is trained, right? Now I can try to test. I can test it from my file. I don't want to do that. I mean, I can take one of these pictures and say that. Do you see me there in front of the webcam? One of you can respond.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And I am without mask. It says enum, right? Enum.
Yes,
Its output is enum. Output is enum, which says that I don't have a mask. Let me wear a mask. Yes. Do you see me with mask?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And machine is able to say that I have mask, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So we have trained a machine on what? With some data, we have trained a machine on, or we have imparted the capability for this machine to detect mask. You see that? And it doesn't have my pictures there, right? It is not just remembering things. It has built its own mental model of people with mask and people without mask. Good? Now you understand what is training. There is data, there is contextual data. You have trained, you have built a model, right? With that model, this is able to take actions, right? Let's go export the model. See, you get the code here. The entire model is built and the model is available. You can select some H5 kind of thing. You can see that. You can actually download the model. You can put it in package called TensorFlow based model, and TensorFlow Lite is primarily like mobile enabled. You can download this model, put it into a small what do you call computing device, and yeah, then one enemy is there. You select. So what do you do? How do you build? How do you go beyond this? You can take this code. You can take this code, put it into a small computing device in front of your what do you call door, right? There is a camera, and the computing device takes this input and this what do you call, then when there is NM, no mask, what you say is like, okay, you can display a message, hey, no mask, or you can the speaker can say like no mask, and when the mask is there, you can actuate, you can what do you call, give a signal to this motor assembly so that the door can be opened. Now you know how to build a smart door which can, in a public office, which can detect mask, right? Good? Hello? Anybody?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You got a feel of it, right? I mean, my agenda was to give you a feel of how the typical learning-based AI works. This is a learning-based AI. All right? You give given enough examples, and there is a mechanism that Google has built, and this is mimicking. This is a mechanism that mimics our neuronal structure. This is an artificial neural network being trained out at the back end in the teaching machine. The artificial neural network has built its own mental model, the model of what do you call a person with a mask and person without mask. I mean, see, the classic example would be like people have what do you call it? You can read about this teachable machine. I can upload instead. So I'll just to give you a feel. I'll give you another. So I can train these on cats and dogs, and then a teachable machine again. Get started. Just to give you like that. So it's again same thing. I'll take another. See, let's call it cat and dog categorization. The classic thing. I've got another. So let me desktop. Just a quick cat dog data set. Cats. It's again like kind of the classic data. It's all cats, right? And I can take some dogs data set. Train the model. I just train the model. I don't want to. I'll upload a file. Let me upload a doc. I've used till this, right? Let me use this doc. It says the doc. I can use some other. Still, it's a doc. Some image. She'll give some image. Yes, same machine, teachable machine. I have trained it on another, what do you call, now the problem given to us, distinguish between cats and dogs. right? And the context given was data labeled as cats, data labeled as pictures, labeled as dogs. The algorithm, the same teachable machine, build a mental model or a model or a knowledge so that it understands or it is able to discriminate between cats and dogs. And yeah, using that model, I've given a new picture, a picture which was unseen, and the model is able to decide with the model. The machine is able to decide whether it's a cat or dog, right? All I want to say over here is what you had there. You had a mechanism which can learn. That's it. And what you give as input to this mechanism is learn what? Learn a model or acquire knowledge, right? Given a problem, this can acquire knowledge in that or build a model in that context. With that model or that acquired knowledge, you'll be able to take actions there. The process of acquiring that knowledge or building that abstraction is called machine learning, and the way in which you build this abstraction is called algorithm, right? So machine learning is all about the process of building that abstraction from the given data or the problem context, so that we can take actions beyond that point. And the way in which, how do you build this abstraction? You need a learning strategy. You need a mechanism, so that either you can write rules, you can build mathematical equations, you can build neural networks, you can build tree structured mechanisms, or you can learn hyperplanes. We'll see a lot of it. So the way in which you learn is called an algorithm, or the means of learning is called an algorithm, and that process of learning is called machine learning. Is it clear? And these are generic learnable machines or machines which can be taught, right? And the learning can be of different types. I'll take a little pause over here. Any questions so far? Any questions? You can unmute one at a time.
No, sir.
Okay, that's good. There are, okay. So let's go back. Types of learning. What are the types of learning? That's very generic in nature. What we have seen now, that cat dog case or a mask no mask case, is learning with labeled training data. Labeled training data. So I've taken a collection of pictures of cat and said these are cats. I've taken a set of pictures and said these are dogs. I've taken a set of pictures and then cat dog categorization your problem. With that labeled data, you build your model using an appropriate algorithm. The algorithm used there was called a neural network, and then try to classify whether it's a dog or a cat. And the second problem was I labeled mask images with mask as mask, and images with or M, or images with without mask as no mask, and I call it as NM. And then the machine was asked to learn from it and then take actions beyond that point. All right. So this is called the supervised learning paradigm. Who gave these particular machines the labels? There's a teacher, and this is a classic classic learning paradigm. Some teacher, somebody said, hey, these are all cats, taken some photographs, put it together and say, like, these are all cats and these are all dogs. And then so I was a teacher for this particular problem, and with that labeled data, the machine was able to learn. Is this the only way in which machine learning works? This is just one type of, this is a classic type of machine learning, where from labeled training data, the machine is able to learn an abstraction, or the algorithm will find an abstraction, the algorithm will find an abstraction, and then act on it. Your typical example would be an email spam classifier, right? You have enough of spam emails and harm emails, non-harmful, non-spam emails, and then the machine is able to, like, kind of, I'm somebody like you become the teacher. Whenever you mark a mail as spam, that goes as you become the teacher, and that labeled data goes to Google's, if it is Gmail, to Google as spam, and then Google, based on your actions, decides whether to use that for training or what. So what I want to say is, from labeled data, the machine can learn, and such a paradigm is called supervised learning. And the second paradigm, this is what we have seen today as example. The second paradigm is called unsupervised learning. Discover patterns in unlabeled data. Have you heard of a company called Amazon? I'm sure you must have bought at least one, one thing from Amazon, because Amazon is so prevalent in gateway. So Amazon had this market basket data. When you get into a supermarket or a market, you have a basket. You put all your items in your basket. All right. So Amazon must have been visited by, I would say, millions, or I don't know whether it's trillions of users in the past. So everybody, whenever they get it, they put things in your cart and buy. So there is a market basket. For every user, there is a market basket data available with Amazon. What Amazon has done is they have grouped these market baskets, right, and identified, like, okay, there are people who buy these things together. All right, and so they identified, they clustered users based on their market basket data. And then beyond that point, what Amazon has done is, when a new user gets in, he'll try to identify which group he falls into or she falls into. Then say, hey, you looks like you may be interested in these things, right? The user may have added only 2 items which belongs to a particular group, which was typically bought by. So there are another 3 items which this group typically buy. So you given a new user or a user which has not purchased enough, Amazon will identify a group to which the user would potentially collaborate with or can get identified with, and then suggest items based on that group's behavior. This was an algorithm invented by Amazon, and this algorithm is called collaborative filtering. So nobody tells from the market data of Amazon that, hey, these groups are this kind of behavior. Nothing of that kind. What Amazon has done is, Amazon tried to discover patterns or groups from the unlabeled data, and with new users, Amazon was trying to predict what all things that people would typically buy if they fall into such groups. All right, this kind of learning is called unsupervised learning. All right, basically, and this algorithm called collaborative filtering was one of the prime inventions with which Amazon became so popular. We can read about it, and we may discuss a little of it through our course. It's called collaborative filtering, Amazon's collaborative filtering. That was a typical example for unsupervised learning. Clustering is a typical example. Grouping is an example for unsupervised learning. So there is no label given to a group of items. Rather, the patterns emerges, and from the patterns, actions are taken. And the third class is called the reinforcement learning. We don't have a lot of content on reinforcement learning primarily in our course, because it's that particular learning type or types of learning is still in the early nascent stages. I'll give an example. If we have gone to a motor vehicle training school or driving school, which teaches you how to drive a car, for every action that you take on the car, say you may be like, instead of applying brake, you may apply clutch or whatever, accelerator, and then the driving instructor gives you either scolds you or say, respond to it. Or if you do things right, if you are correctly applying your accelerator or your clutch or whatever, clutch pedal or whatever, then the supervisor, for every action that you take when you drive that car, the supervisor gives you an immediate feedback. Right? Feedback can be a reward or a punishment. All right, and your agenda is to learn to drive the car based on the feedback that you get from the supervisor. At every action that you take, you keep improving yourself or you correct yourself, right? So that you can ultimately learn to drive a car. You can ultimately reach the objective of learning to drive a car. So this is an example for reinforcement learning. So it's basically, there is a set of actions, and you go through these actions. At every state, you can take an action, and every action will have an associated reward or penalization. And based on the penalization or the reward that you get for an action, you correct yourself, meaning you adjust yourself, so that your ultimate goal is you need to have a set of actions through which you can achieve your goal. And one of the prime research that happened on this perspective is on an algorithm called Q-learning. And towards the end of the course, we may hit that. And there is a company called DeepMind, which has built a game playing software, meaning AI software, which won against the world's best Go player. And the program is called AlphaGo. And the algorithm it used was called Deep Q-learning. And the Deep Q-learning is an example for reinforcement learning. So DeepMind uses reinforcement learning to build AlphaGo, primarily the program that won against the human, the best human available on Go game. The champion was defeated by a computer program called AlphaGo. This was reinforcement learning. These are types of learning. So machine learning is all about, AI is all about building that smart capability, that decision-making capability. And decision-making capability can be either rule-based, explicitly programmed, or can be learned. Learned meaning learning is the process of acquiring that abstraction with which you can take actions, or abstraction or model with which you can take actions. And the way in which you learn is called an algorithm, right? An algorithm can be as simple as, say, for example, I've got what you call points. You have got a straight line, and I have a two-dimensional data. So I can, in a two-dimensional plane, I can draw a straight line separating the two classes. If that is the case, my learning problem reduces to finding out that straight line, right? So I may be finding the equation of a line, the parameters of a line. That can be my learning algorithm, and that can be my model. And my learning algorithm is the one which helps me to learn that particular parameters of that hyperplane or the line, right? My learning algorithm can be an algorithm which finds enough of and analyze the data and finds out enough of what you call probability values with which I can take actions. So my model can be a set of probabilities, and my learning algorithm would be the algorithm which computes those probabilities from the available data. All right. My model that I learned to solve a problem can be a set of rules, and my learning algorithm is from the data. It should be able to write the set of rules. The rules can be in the form of plain rules, or it can be in the form of a tree. All right. My learning algorithm can be an algorithm which essentially trains a neural network, primarily learns the weights of a neural network, right? That's my learning algorithm. So a set of weights for a neural network is my learned model. This is what we have, whatever examples that I've shown you, that mask, no mask, or dog case, the background learning algorithm is neural network based algorithm. And what essentially it learns is, for the problem that we give from the available data, it learns the weights of the neural network. That's it. And then once the weights are set right, it can solve the problem. So the model is a trained neural network with weights. My learning algorithm is the neural learning algorithm or a neural network training algorithm, which with the learn can be picked up from the available data. Right. So your model can be of different types, and the types will depend on the type of algorithm you use, and the types of algorithm you use are generally classified, or the learning paradigms are generally classified into 3 types: supervised, where your training data is labeled; unsupervised, you have data but you don't have any labels for the data; and the third is you have only action, reward pairs, and you need to take the sequence of actions through so that you can solve the problem, right? And most of our course will be around supervised and unsupervised learning paradigms, and we may hit reinforcement learning towards the end of the course a little, right? That's pretty much about the types of learning. We are going to see this a little more detail in the coming session. All right. With that little introduction to I would say very brief introduction to machine learning, I want to give you where you can head to, what you can do with this. because you're all students of program in either data intelligence or data analytics and machine learning. What are the kind of career opportunities that you will have in front of you? I thought I'll give you an intro to it right in the beginning, primarily because I'll help you out to tune yourself, to train yourself. All right, and so there are two classes of jobs that are primarily there in the machine learning or data intelligence or data analytics area. All right, the first class, let's look at the class of jobs for engineers, and you can graduate to become a scientist also later. Let's start with the engineer positions. There are two classes of engineers that are typically employed in industry. One is, the first class of engineers are called development engineers, and the second class is called the research engineers. The development engineers can be like people who data engineering. Say, for example, I've taken data from the web, labeled this as dogs and cats. I've taken data from the web and said like these are mask and no mask. I can take data from the web and clean the textual data from the web, clean the textual data for some training, saying like these are all data belonging to Mandarin, these are all data belonging to English, and then train a neural, whatever, train a particular machine learning algorithm to distinguish given text as language, meaning which language belongs to. So basically language identification problem. So there are people who actually works with data, makes data ready for machine learning, interprets data from machine learning algorithms, plays with what you call machine learning libraries and mechanisms, and does a lot of work on the data aspect of machine learning or data analytics. These are called data engineering jobs. These are called development engineers, who are typically working on the data engineering aspect. The second class, I mean, another example of development engineers would be NLP engineers, natural language processing engineers. The natural language processing engineers, for example, you need to process Mandarin, you need to process Hindi. I need to build what you call a classifier which can detect Russian printed characters. I need to build a classifier which can distinguish between Russian and English. I need to build a classifier which can understand novel concepts in a piece of text. So from language processing perspective, so NLP development engineers. Then comes image processing engineers, engineers who work, who has knowledge on image processing and then does image processing related jobs such as an image tagging, the kind of things that we have done today, or a video processing, video tagging kind of stuff, image processing, video processing engineers. Then there are people who works in the intersection of software and hardware. These are robotics engineers who understands the processor part and also potentially on sensors part and the actuators part. So they can actually work on the intersection of electronics, electromechanical and computer science. So robotics development engineers. Then there is another class of engineers called quantitative quants or fintech engineers. These are actually like you know that whenever you apply for a credit card or typically a credit card or a loan, the banks will run. I mean, they take your data. They have their own model. They have from their past experience of their customers. Customers who were good from their perspective, bad from their perspective. They have created their own. They must have trained some machine learning models. And a new customer data is getting, and what they do is they'll potentially put your data through this machine learning model, and they'll assess the risk. And based on the risk, they'll either give you access to the credit or they'll deny it. So there are people, and likewise portfolio management, people who work on investment banking, portfolio management, risk assessment, risk management, a lot of fintech, financial technology related jobs. So there are people with this kind of exposure. They understand data, machine learning, and then apply it in the financial domain. And this is one of the most paid jobs in the industry, right? And then comes development engineers in the web mining area. Web mining is people collect data from the web, build experience for the web, build AI experience for the web, and things of that kind. That's called data or web mining engineers, those who crawl web, process data from the web, and web related aspects of AI. Then comes or people who build what do you call a smart search engine, right? That's a web-related engineer. Then comes data mining, huge collection of data, and how do you extract patterns from that data and such experiences, meaning scalable data. How do you handle AI for scalable data? I mean, meaning AI for large volumes of data. How do you build scalable algorithms for large volumes of data? So they are called data mining engineers. Then people who extract interesting aspects from a collection of data, these are called information retrieval engineers. For example, you have a lot of what you call digital files in your office, and you need to like contextually you need to extract the right things. Somebody writes a simple what you call text box query, and then you should be able to show him like I mean, think of what you call an advocate working on a particular case, and he put some keywords there. Right, and there are n number of there's a lot of history related to this context, meaning there are very similar cases in the past, and you have a lot of verdicts and court orders and things of that kind. Can you build a system which will, from the keywords that the advocate gives, should be able to retrieve the right set of documents which you can refer and potentially apply, utilize. So this is the context of an information retrieval. So that's one class of job. Development engineers who work on building experiences with AI or data analytics. The second class is research engineers. These are engineers who can actually like you can actually like build algorithms. So they can do algorithm analysis. They can even design hardware, software. Say somebody who builds a collaborative filtering algorithm similar to a collaborative filtering is a research engineer. So you take an algorithm, you see that your algorithm, and you may have an implementation of it in the open source world, but you see that the algorithm that you have in hand doesn't solve your problem. Can you tweak this algorithm? Can you change this algorithm a little bit, right? So that your problem is solved. So those who work on that algorithmic aspect, or what is an algorithm? Algorithm is a way to solve a problem, right? And machine learning algorithm is a learning algorithm. So machine learning algorithm is an algorithm which can help the machine to learn a model. Machine learning algorithm is an algorithm which helps the machine to learn a model, so that in the current context of the problem with the available data, it is able to build that model and act, right? With that model, it should be able to act. That particular algorithm or the means or the way to build the model helps the machine to find that abstraction, so that with the abstraction, the machine will be able to take actions, right? So can you build a new way of learning for the machine? That's the algorithmic aspect of it. So these are research engineers who explores it. And if you can graduate, meaning like if you pursue research further, you may become an engineer. You can become a domain specialist or a scientist. For example, you must have seen a lot of data scientists, image processing scientists, robotics scientists, quantitative scientists, web mining scientists, information. So these are people who graduate from a development role to a domain specialist or a scientist role. And there is another class, the research engineers typically graduate to become research scientists. These are algorithm design specialists, and that is the highest level of what you call expertise you can get. And of course, that would be the most paid job, because if you can design algorithms, right, new ways of what you call helping the machine to learn, you become the expert out there. So you, with a PhD or without even a PhD, a lot of experience, you become a research scientist, primarily algorithm designer. And then the natural question that you would be, how do you reach there, right? There are many fields which are related to machine learning. You must have seen pattern recognition, probability, statistics, information theory, database. I don't want to explain. Evolutionary theory, nature-inspired computing, image processing, neuroscience, cognitive science, decision theory, optimization, pattern. These are all like related fields. Fundamentally, all I want to say is what you need to do. Like, I mean, there are a lot of related fields. If your agenda is to become a development engineer or domain specialist, all these would need a good programming skill. Learn programming, and most of the AI or data systems are currently, today's world is built around Python. Learn Python, and there are scientific computing world which uses R, and there are a few companies also leveraging R. R is also good, but make sure that you understand Python. All right. If your agenda is to become a development engineer or domain specialist, start playing with machine learning algorithms and libraries. There are many machine learning algorithms and libraries available in Python and also in R. You start familiarizing yourself with these libraries. That becomes critical to become a development engineer or domain specialist. And domain engineer or development engineer or domain specialist, they need to have a domain knowledge. Say, for example, you are in fintech, you need to understand a little of fintech. You are in language processing, you need to understand language, the theory of languages. You are an image processing scientist, you need to understand image processing. Or you are a vision scientist, you need to understand vision. You are a vision engineer, you need to understand vision. So basically, like, you need programming in Python, you need to have exposure to the algorithms out there, and you need to acquire the domain knowledge. But if your agenda is to become a research engineer or research scientist, you need programming, you need all those skills, you need programming, you need to understand the libraries. Beyond that point, you have to start appreciating mathematics. Primarily, like, you would need subjects like a linear algebra or a matrix theory, you need probability statistics and potentially optimization techniques. This is not an exhaustive list. These are the, I would say, the minimal set of things that you should be familiar with. And learn the theory of programming, data structures, algorithms, and algorithms in machine learning. You should be a good programmer and learn programming and start playing with ML algorithms and libraries. All right, and you should be explorative in nature. What you need to do is you should start looking inside libraries and start reading research literature. Is something that you can't avoid if your agenda is to become a research engineer or research scientist, because you need to become an algorithm specialist. All right. So if your agenda is to become an application specialist or a domain development engineer or a domain specialist, programming is a must for both the streams. Your familiarity with algorithms, get your hands dirty with algorithms is a must. You should acquire domain knowledge. But if you want to become an algorithm specialist, you start appreciating mathematics. You should understand how algorithms do work, learn the theory of programming, data structures, algorithms, and algorithms in machine learning. All right, and be explorative. Start exploring things, start reading the current research literature, go beyond your classroom, read a little around it, experiment a little around it, and try to tweak a little so that you will get that exploratory skill. All right. That's all I wanted to say on your action items when it comes to your career path. And this is the Gartner's hype cycle. Gartner is a company, it's a data company primarily. What they do is they call it a BI, business intelligence company. What they do is they collect data on trends, on emerging technologies, and they publish every year. They publish a curve called Gartner hype curve. This curve has, if you look at it, this has 4 regions. The first region is called an innovation trigger. Whenever a new technology comes in, everybody will talk about it, and every newspaper, every politician, every academic, every industry practitioner will say, yes, this will solve all the world's problems. All right, that's called the innovation trigger region. And beyond that point, what will happen is, you will reach the peak of inflated expectations. All right, and then the disillusionment will happen gradually. People realize, no, it's not like that. Yeah, there are problems that can be solved. So people feel bad about this technology at times, and they say, okay, it doesn't solve all world's problems, and then, yeah, let me get out, let me start working, let me continue working, whatever. That is, they'll become more realistic. Then there are a few people who pursue this technology, and then they move on, explore it. That's called a slope of enlightenment time. After that period, some of those companies or academicians or even political folks will realize, hey, yes, it works for me, and they'll come to a plateau of productivity. So this is hype cycle. You can go back, look at Google. Gartner hype cycle is published every year. It's around September, and I just got, like, yesterday I downloaded the hype cycle for 2020. And the interesting part is you can see a lot of AI on the left side and black Black is I think it's black. Black is 2 to, I mean, you see a little on blue also. Some AI is on the black. Black, what do you call, mark with black dots, rather bubbles, or blue bubbles. And at the bottom, you can see like blue bubbles says 2 to 5 years to maturity. Plata meaning like the production things will happen in 2 to 5 years, and the black would say like 5 to 10 years. Right, which means that you have at least 2 to 10 years time for AI to mature, to get into actual production. All right, and machine learning AI, I would say, even in Sophia, not even, I mean, my estimate would be not even 30% of Sophia is machine learned. It's all rule based, right? Which means that more than 70% would be rule based. We still live in an era of rule based AI, right? I'll introduce you to a problem called SQuAD, a later point in time. SQuAD is a Stanford question answering data set problem. What it says is, the problem is this: given a paragraph, can you answer questions from that paragraph? This is a challenge given by Stanford, and the competitors include researchers from Microsoft. Yeah, it's sort of getting solved. Meaning, given a paragraph, can you answer questions on the paragraph? That learning itself is considered to be a challenge today. So what I want to say is, ML-based AI is still in the nascent stages, and you still have a lot to do, a lot to explore, and a lot of avenues to apply. All right, and I feel it's a right opportunity, and yeah, I started working on this area way back in 2001. I think my first paper was in 2002, 18 years back, 2002 or 3. I think 2003, the first paper got published in Pattern Recognition Journal of Elsevier. Right, and that time I was working on an area called pattern recognition. Right, I said, hey, I'm working on pattern recognition. Later on, when I started applying these algorithms on scalable data, people said, hey, your work is getting into what is called data mining. You're working on scalable data related algorithms. So data mining is your research. And when I submitted my thesis in 2007 in Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, IISc Bangalore, people said, yes, what you did is today called machine learning, right? So I worked on, you can search my Google Scholar. I worked on an algorithm called kernel-based learning algorithm. So what I want to say is, I mean, I still do the same thing, which I started way back in 2001. Nothing much have changed in my way of looking at the algorithmic context of what we today call as machine learning. And people started calling it cognitive, what do you call learning, cognitive computing also these days. So it's all about, right, can you build, right, AI, machine intelligence or artificial intelligence, all about, can you build machines which has enough of knowledge or a model or actionable knowledge so that it can take smart actions, right? Can you impart intelligence to these machines? People started imparting this intelligence by explicit programming or rule-based. And now we are in an era where if you give enough of context, I would say the context can be as simple as labeled data in a supervised paradigm, or it can be enough data where the machine can, or the algorithm can go dig out patterns and take, and that patterns become the model. That's unsupervised learning. Or it can be context where you incrementally present the machine with the data, all right, as in a game playing context. You incrementally see context data, and then the machine takes actions, and then it learns from its own experience, reinforced. Whatever be the context, from the contextual data, can you build algorithms, right, which can inject the knowledge or the model, so that once it claims that it has learned, it should be able to take intelligent or smart actions. It should be able to decide. It should have decision-making capabilities. Can you build such algorithms? The science of building such algorithms is machine learning, right? Can you build algorithms, or can you build mechanisms or means with which the machine will be able to find abstractions or models or knowledge with which it can take smart actions so that the machine will exhibit intelligent behavior. Then you call the mechanism or the entire machinery as intelligent or artificially intelligent. And artificial intelligence powered by AI, because there is an algorithm, you don't explicitly program, there's an algorithm which builds the model or the knowledge needed by that machinery to take actions on unseen context. So machine learning is all about, from a given problem context, can you build algorithms? Can you design algorithms which will enable the machinery to inject models or inject knowledge so that actions can be, or decision-making capability can be imparted to the machine, all right? That science is called machine learning. And it all started with what you call a conference in Dartmouth. The term was coined, and many worked on that context. And one among the, and I've already talked about Professor McCarthy, another interesting scientist that you should understand is Alan Turing. Turing came up with a test called Turing test. I'll urge you to look at the Turing test. Is essentially like this. It's a test to detect, to decide whether the machine has intelligent behavior or not. Test goes like this. There is an interrogator. Interrogator is somebody who can ask questions. And there are two rooms. One room will have a human, other will have that AI machine. And the interrogator doesn't know which room 1 and room 2. The interrogator doesn't know which room the machine is sitting or the human is sitting. The interrogator asks questions, both the machine and the human responds back. If the interrogator is able to decide which is machine and which is human, the machine has failed. And if the machine is able to confuse the interrogator, meaning if the interrogator is unable to decide from the response that he gets for his questions, then the machine has succeeded, saying that yes, the machine is able to mimic the human, right? To confuse the interrogator that the interrogator is unable to distinguish between the response of the human and the machine, then we say the machine is intelligent. And this test, introduced by Alan Turing, is called Turing test, all right? So AI goes back to the history, goes back to ages. ML, the theory, ML may be a new term which is currently celebrated primarily because of the potential and probably the reskilling opportunity or the new application areas. But the fundamental sciences behind ML do existed, and I shared my own story. I started working on pattern recognition, and now I am respected as a machine learning specialist in the context with maybe like, tens of publications. And I don't see much of a difference in the way in which I look at the problem context and the way in which I do design algorithms. It's the same, but it has got a new interesting name or jargon as its name, called machine learning. It's all about the science of building building algorithms which can help machine to learn a model with which the machine will be able to exhibit intelligent behavior. And that's all from me potentially today. I may not be like, I don't want to push a lot of things to your class today as the first session, but we'll start formally in the next class on machine learning. We'll start looking at supervised learning paradigm, and from the next class onwards. And what I would suggest is we can take a 30 minutes break. And now I think it's 11:15 here. We'll come back at 11:45, and we can have an interactive session. And I also want to give you some action items, meaning I want you to look at a few things right from today. Some reading assignments, some experiential stuff, and then we'll wind up the class maybe like 12:15, 12:30. We can do an interactive session. So I don't want to push a lot of content, but we'll have an interactive section post 30 minutes. Good. We'll come back at 11:45.